welcome to Patient Preferred Presents. On this amazing new show, we will be introducing you to some of today's top physicians and leaders in the healthcare industry while sharing new discoveries, medical procedures, expert advice, and answering all of your healthcare concerns. So stick around, you don't want to miss today's episode.
Hello and welcome into Patient Preferred Presents. My name is Jay McFarland, and today I'm very excited to introduce you to Dr. Robert Carney. He's a notable cardiologist treating patients at Tyler Cardiovascular Consultants, an innovative cardiovascular services practice. Dr. Carney is board certified in cardiovascular disease and internal medicine. His impressive professional journey spanning 4 decades has been instrumental in the development of new treatments for various cardiovascular diseases. Well, Doctor, it's a real pleasure to have you on the show today. I'm really anxious and excited to hear about your background. I love talking to doctors and finding out when they decided to be a doctor. Was this a thing like when you were a little kid and somebody asked you, what do you want to be when you grow up? Did you say doctor? And if not, how did you get to that point?
You know, I worked several jobs, and one of them was for a good friend of mine. His dad was a physician. And the more I was around the guy, the more I admired him. He had a lot of the attributes that we value: hardworking, perseverance. And I came to I think he became my mentor. Having said that, as we went through looking at the availability of all the options, it was like I found I had a real love for science. And I think I like to pursue knowledge for its own sake. I'm interested in random stuff. So I think that I was drawn into the area by the doctor. And then once I got into the area, I love the biological sciences and physiology and all the stuff of it. And I think that put me one step closer in the direction of, what do I do to use this stuff? How can I do this stuff? And really, in a real 30,000 foot view, really part of medicine, now not the art side, but the science side is getting pieces. You have to know the pieces, obviously, that's the science, and fitting them together to form an answer to a puzzle. Now, part of that's also the art of getting the information and the art of presenting the information. That's a different subject. But the pieces are the scientific basis. You know, every disorder of every step in physiology has a disease name for it. So you'd go and you'd find disorders of the Krebs cycle. They all have names for them. And so the science side was very methodical. It's very interesting. And I'm still, one of the things about cardiology, it continues to evolve. It has new stuff, and it has new recommendations. It has new stuff virtually every year, virtually. And so this practice, what we do today, doesn't resemble what we started off doing. It's completely different. So I think the knowledge and information appealed to me, the body of information, the sciences appealed to me, and then the way to utilize that was take care of people. So I grew up in a restaurant. I like people. I genuinely like to visit with them. And so I think that was an offshoot of that. Once you get into medical school, you have to get into medical school, which is another problem. But once you get into medical school, you're exposed to a wide variety of a lot of information and across a wide spectrum. And some of that, just piques your interest. And so that's the areas you're drawn into as a specialty.
Yeah, I love this idea of puzzle solving. It's like you're the Sherlock Holmes of medicine in some ways. I hadn't heard a doctor talk about it in that way, that you're always trying to unravel a puzzle. Talk about that a little bit more.
Well, based on, it's certainly not brilliance. I would say that's the last thing it is. I think it's a matter of approximating. You get the information. There's several black boxes on this that I can't explain, but if you talk to the patient and you listen to the patient and you really take what they say and interpret it, you say what order they say it in, with what intensity. If they have a loved one there, you look and you kind of check out what the significant other says. You're going to get a sort of a rough ghost-like image of the problem, and you don't know what that consists of, but you kind of know it's either over here or it's over there. And so that enables you to start making some artful questions about things that help to draw it out, like what time does it come on, how long does it last, what brings it on, and then through experience you realize a lot of times it's medicine and overprescribed medicine, and we have to change the medicine and drop the medicine. And I think if you take those pieces together in a constructive sense, you've got the interview process where you're talking to the patient. The biggest overlooked part is no one listens to the patient. They just check a bunch of boxes and go on. But listening to the patient, and then you're able to rank order their problems about what they think is worse, and with their worst problem, other things that go with it. Sometimes that points a picture in the direction. Sometimes it gives you the diagnosis. But then you can go to polishing the apple, kind of getting more information about talking to them and going into some specific things that might help to suggest the problem or would mitigate against that as a diagnosis. Then last, you get to, okay, I think it's this, we should do A, B, and C. And then you have to explain to the patient why you think that's the case. And explaining it to the patient, I think I'm better than fair at trying to explain it to them why I think this is a problem, and why don't we try this? Look, why don't we try this? You stop this medicine, you go 2 weeks, you check your blood pressure, check your pulse, see if you have a spell. When you have a spell, check your blood pressure, check your pulse, and I'll see you back in 2 weeks. We'll look at the tests that we did, we'll look at the blood work, we'll see where we're at.
I love that you talk about listening. I feel so often that people feel like their relationship with their doctor is just get in, get some type of prescription and get out. But you really talk about this process of listening and getting to know them.
I'm not going to yell. I promise not to yell. It's a lost art. It just isn't done. It just isn't done, and it's not valued, and it's to the detriment of what used to be a kind and noble profession. I think now it's checkboxing and doing stuff and going from there. So I think it's really the worst of the worst in terms of the opportunities that you have that you fritter away. Listen to the patients. You can do that in a pretty constrained form. You don't have to listen to them for an hour. Usually we spend about 5 minutes talking about the problem, and then we'll talk about, horses or the weather for 5 minutes too. I mean, which is sort of part of that is also, it's not completely to waste, because while we're doing that, I'm also still constraining different things in the diagnosis. I'm getting that ghost image to kind of solidify up. And it's good for me emotionally just to be able to visit, because I like to talk. So.
Well, it sounds like you have a great bedside manner for sure. I'm curious how it feels when you know that you've nailed it, you figured it out, you're putting this puzzle together, and you prescribe something or some action, and they listen, and it actually works.
Well, we surprisingly, until COVID, which is kind of out of our bailiwick, but until COVID, it's very unusual for us to have patients die. We have a waiting room full of old codgers that are 85 and 90, and our duty and honor and privilege is to carry forward and take care of them and optimize their quality of life and how they feel, which is a challenge, as you know. But having said that, the emotional toll of having people die is a legitimate cost. There's a legitimate burden, a legitimate weight on the shoulders, because we're not used to having people die.
Mm-hmm.
So that cost or that weight or that burden is there and to some variable degree every week. The flip side of that is it's not necessarily like getting on an airplane and going to Antarctica, but it feels good when you've got an operational diagnosis. I think it's this. I think it's this. And there's I don't know how many things there are because there's a lot of stuff, but there are a number of things. When you say A and I'm thinking B, it's like that's it. Drop the mic. It's and it's a good emotional paycheck. You know, it's like I got it. I got you. I got this. I understand what it is, and we don't need any testing. Here's what you do. So, and that's that's fun.
I think I kind of know the answer, but what most excites you about what you do? What gets you up in the morning where you're like, yes, I get to go and do this today?
Well, if we strip away, the veneer, everyone hates the computers. No one hates computers more than me. I hate the fact that I can't control my process. I started back in the day when I had one nurse and one front desk gal, and we did things my way, and it was that way. And now corporate medicine, it's large volumes and large numbers, and everything is large. So being able to have the patients come into the room is sort of the salmon swimming upstream. If we get them in the room, it's perfect in the room. It's perfect. How you doing? What's going on? Hey, how's your sister? She had cancer last time. And they'll say, well, how's so-and-so? A lot of them will say, I was in the hospital when you had your twins in 1988. Or, I remember that when you hurt your foot and you were on crutches. So that in the room is perfect. In the room is perfect. When you step out to do the paperwork, not so perfect. But in the room is perfect.
And that's what you look forward to each day.
That's the only reason to come in. The rest of the stuff you can make some diagnosis over the phone on telehealth. We did a lot of telehealth during COVID, and it's not good for new patients, and it's not good for a really complicated problem because it's like that anchovy paste, that little something that we're missing that you get in the room with the patient that makes you able to complete the recipe. I think that it's not good for new patients because you don't know them that well. And I like the telemetry for when you have one problem and you're tracking that problem and you've done X, Y, and Z, and then you check them back and they don't have to drive 75 miles and they show you the paper, they show you their blood pressures, and the blood pressures are better and they feel better. So I like that a lot, but in the room is perfect. I love the room with the patient.
That's fantastic. You mentioned how things have changed since you started, and I know at Tyler Cardiovascular Consultants, you guys are always on the cutting edge technology. How have things changed, and how do you stay on top of all of the new technology?
Well, you read and you read and you go to conferences and you read and you talk to your peers and you read. We do a lot of research which exposes you the technology before it's available. And some of that technology, frankly, doesn't work, and some works very well. It's set up that if it doesn't work, it does no worse than your best technology. You have to demonstrate, achievement and betterment for the item that you're doing to be approved. So you're thinking actively as opposed to there's never a dull moment because you're engaged. It's like a chainsaw that's running all the time. You're thinking about doing X, Y, and Z. The research helps us to advance that frontier, and then in the meantime, you're still taking care of the patients with, new medicines. There's new medicines, and they're not small medicines. They're huge improvements. In both lifestyle and in terms of survival. What you love best are these people that come in and they've got 20 problems and they've got just a whole bunch of stuff wrong with them, and they're fighting each of these problems. You help them fight the battle with their heart. You've got to work as best you can with that problem because they've got rheumatoid arthritis and they've got other issues, and you want to keep them on the road, kind of keep them up and around. So it's sort of a joint, arm to arm. Let's try this on this and see if we can get it a little bit better. And you realize a lot of these people are spirited. They have a lot of miles in the car.
Mm.
They got a lot of door dings. So
they just need a good mechanic, right? And that's who you are.
Either that, or you can find someone that can powder coat it and cover it up so that you don't see them. But it's an issue, and I admire the spirit. I love the patients. They generally, they want to get better. They're willing to work. Most of them are reasonably compliant about their medicines. We in turn try and we don't have a big rank order of let's do impossible stuff and see if you can do it. It's, keep the medicines to twice a day so you can remember it, and try and make things workable for the patient, and sort of find a pathway they can follow without having to climb over a bunch of rocks.
Yeah, I think that's important, that it's something that they can do, they can remember, and so that's, as frictionless as possible.
There's a coefficient of friction. Some people start out with a bias. They don't want to take this class of medicine, or they don't want to take medicine, or they don't want to, whatever they don't want to do. And, I'm just here to take care of people. If they don't want to do X, well, I can tell them Y is not as good, but we can try Y if you want to do Y. And you got to work, it's not an adversarial relationship where you're going to do this or I'm not going to take. No, we don't. It's like, well, I think this would be better, but if you want to try that, we can try that, as long as you're willing to think about doing the other if this doesn't work. Give them some options, some quality options.
Yeah, I love that. So they can decide what they think works best for them.
Well, it's their body.
Yeah, that's right.
All the bodies are different. They react to different doses. My mother, God rest her soul, could look at a grain of sand and fall down. So she was so sensitive to medicine. I take that to heart. We usually try stuff on the low end, and I explain to people, we're going to start this real low, so don't look for like a major change. But if you notice you take it and you feel better for a few hours, and then later on you feel worser, that tells me it's probably working. When you come back, we'll look at maybe increasing the dosage or the frequency, and we'll work it out.
Very good. Now, I know you mentioned new research, and I know you've spearheaded several clinical trials, and you continue to do so. Talk a little bit about those trials and kind of the process. It sounds like it's more puzzle, more trying to figure out the puzzles, but projecting forward a little bit.
I think it's more like target shooting. I think you have an idea which direction you want to do. You want to do this direction that involves, for example, the how a stent performs. So you take all the stuff that's known about stents and you distill it into a question. If I have this platform, is this platform a better configuration, or is this drug a better drug to drug-coated stents? Is that a better drug? And we're going to take this vehicle and we're going to test it against the best in the world in a randomized trial, which has its own rules, and it keeps it pure, where it's not biased by any intentional or unintentional bias. And then you compare the two, and at the end of the day, of course it's months, not days, but at the end of the day, which of these is better, or are they comparable? And so that's the business question. And obviously, in case you haven't figured it out, the drug companies make a bunch of money on that because they get new drugs approved. But the new drugs can be revolutionary too. Mm-hmm. And they become the standard of care. That's really what they're looking for, is being able to say that they came up with it, they developed it, they made it, you tried it in research, it worked really, really well, and now it's part of regular therapy. We've got innumerable drugs dating all the way back to 87 that are now commonly used, that were researched when we started, then it became accepted, then it became preferred.
That's got to be an exciting process. Is there any clinical research that you've done that really stands out to you, that you're like, wow, that was an amazing discovery, and you've watched it kind of go forward and save lives?
Well, there's the big and the small. We did a study on heart attacks, and the medicine used to be. I can date myself. It used to be we would sit and watch a heart attack and give them medicine, and that's all we had to do. And then we evolved into doing pictures or catheterization. Then we evolved into doing pictures and giving medicine. And then once we started down the medication trial, we'd stop the heart attack, which is fairly dramatic if you're in that business. So we did a comparison of how to give the medicine. And one of our early contributions was front loading or giving more medicine initially or quickly to cause lysis or dissolving that clot. And that was back in the 80s. And that was revolutionary in the sense it was a very dramatic. It was a dramatic study. Now, in terms of utility, we were one of many hundreds of centers that did early data on heart failure. And at the time, heart failure was a lot like a dog out in the back barking. You didn't know what it was. I mean, you knew kind of what it looked like, but the therapy was like, well, we don't, we'll try this or try that. And these basically codified the guideline-based medical therapy that everybody uses now. And first there were ACE inhibitors, and then there were beta blockers, and now it's become pretty codified. And we contributed in a small way to that advancement of knowledge. And some of these are important in magnitude. We did a tiny bit of the work, but I think all of it constructs to the betterment of the process. You kind of give back to the community and the patients. We're able to offer them better cutting edge stuff. Sometimes you do things and it doesn't turn out like it was going to work out so well, and sometimes it does.
Yeah, right. You don't know. That's the whole point. That's why we call it research, right?
Right. Yeah, that's what they call it. That's what the science says in the research department. That's why we call it research.
Yeah, fantastic. I'm curious what you think about, and maybe this is asking for too much of a generalization, but do we as your patients, as Americans, do we take heart health seriously enough?
I throw that back and say, what do you mean by seriously?
Well,
Because
I
I
mean,
have cadre, I have quartiles. I have one quartile that exercises most days, eats pretty well, and they do their medications awfully well, and we call them good patients. And while they still may have the luck of the draw and have bad luck because of their family genes and some of the consequences that happen, no fault of theirs, they're doing everything right. I have vegans who have stents because it's not just the diet, obviously. They're born with bad genes and they're dealt bad cards, and they try and play the best they can. And you love those people. I mean, you obviously identify with them, and they're good patients. They generally do much better than they would have done, but they don't do as well as necessarily you would want them to do, because bad things happen to nice people. Then you've got a group of people that are pretty good about medicines. They miss them once in a while. They go off their diet periodically. Periodically being anything from every 20 minutes to once a week. But those people are they're working hard. They're doing the best they can. We're all human, and that's a fair number of the constituency. Then you have people that really don't care and really don't take their medicines, and they have the expected consequences. They frequently have significant issues, and they're not always innocuous. They can be really bad issues, and you do the best. You empathize with them. We're all human, and they're doing the best they can. They can do better, and we try and give them I'm not much of a yeller. I don't yell at people. If they don't, I'm not gonna. I'm not the food police. I'm not gonna go to their house and make sure they put their fork down and don't eat stuff. They've got to have some buy-in, and I do the best I can to get them, in a sense, to really kind of understand the process, and then whatever they can buy into in terms of self-control. And I also tell them, there's what's different from I think a little bit, maybe, I'm not sure, but I'm not much of an abstinent person. I don't think that people can just diet and not eat. I think our society's growing from millennia, sitting around a fire breaking bread and chewing breadsticks. You've got to find a way to make it work for you, which is better foods, better choices where you're getting a bowl of salad, not a bowl of macaroni, better food choices, and think about limiting your available amount that you're eating and manage the process. It's a lot like if you've ever been in East Texas, you're not going to control the water. When it rains 12 inches, the water's going to go where the water's going to go. You can influence it, but you can't make it do anything. And I don't think people's diets can be just made into, we want you to do this and you're going to do it. You have to make it where it's workable for them, and what works for them may not work for somebody else. But it all involves, it comes back to the same thing. Appropriate choices. You have to choose right. I can't choose for you. I'm not the food police. You have to eat less. You don't lose weight in the gym. You lose weight in the kitchen. You need a smaller spoon. And those little steps add up if the people do it.
That's fantastic. I feel like you kind of view yourself not as a coach barking at somebody, but like maybe a cheerleader / advocate, a partner, a mentor.
I think that's reasonable. I think there's a lot of coaches that don't yell, and you can see the game plan going in their head, and once you understand the game plan, you want to play for them. And I think a lot of patients, they understand the game plan and they want to play that. They understand how to do it. You give them a roadmap or a way they can do it without expecting to be a monk,
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Doctor, you've been honored and named a Patient Preferred Cardiologist of the Year for your obvious expertise and for achieving excellence in patient care. Talk a little bit about what that means to you.
But all this is mediated by the patients. I mean, when you look at Google Doc, I've got 85-star reviews, and the patients are what it's about. And the patients, I think now we have a more, I think it's more socially responsible media, and they're willing to go out and Yelp somebody when they're not happy. But I think there's also the flip side. I think they're willing to talk to people and put a recommendation in if there's somebody they really like. And I do think that there's usually there's a fairly strong feeling about your doctor, hopefully. And so I think it comes from the patients.
Yeah, absolutely. If they're happy with the service that you're providing, it's almost like any other industry, right? If you're getting great reviews, it's because of how you treat them and the results that they're getting.
Well, it's different from a lot of industries. There's no difference in the cost structure. The costs are the same whether you go to A, B, C, or D. The outcomes are different. I'll guarantee you that. And the processes are different. I guarantee you that. But it's divorced from the cost. Cost isn't the issue. So it's a little different from getting your muffler fixed,
right,
and getting the cheapest muffler as opposed to getting the best service, but it doesn't cost you any more or any less.
Yeah, very good. Now, your bio says you're affiliated with LifeLink. That's home telemonitoring. I've seen a lot about it. I've seen the commercials. Talk about that relationship a little bit and why it's important to you.
Well, we came up with a mechanism to approach what's called the transition care. We got pretty good at the hospital side, and then this is a scope of discussion that's beyond this, but population health dynamics are very useful, and they're a different kind of medicine. They're medicines. It's a kind of medicine that's done for the thousands and thousands of people, and particularly higher risk people like diabetics or heart failure patients who have a higher incidence of problems. So you're going to see them more, and how do you influence that? You can do different things. We developed a process where the patient was treated at home with a monitoring unit and a case manager, and we dropped our readmission rate in the hospital from 17% back in 2014 down to less than 2%.
Mm.
So the reason wasn't anything other than just listening to the patient and reaching out to them, as opposed to letting them go on, get sicker and sicker and sicker, and then going to the hospital. What do you want to do? Let's go to the hospital. So this was an intervention aimed at keeping up with the patient. And the models are all going that way. All the models are going to helping the patient take care of themselves. Because when you do that, when you get the potato chips out of the house and you get the Fritos out of the house, they have less salt, so they have less failure, less high blood pressure. Yeah, and that's a population dynamic that we're going to see more, and the government's going to pay. They can't really they can get down to see what they think a routine admission is for A, B, or C, but really I think, and I'm not at all considered anything other than an interested observer. I have no expertise other than the fact that I've had a pick and shovel in my hand for 40 years. But I do think their goal is to do populations of 60, 80, 90,000 and look at how they can do better care and make the cost cheaper. And that self-care is going to be the easy way to enhance the self-care is to have somebody call them and talk to them. So that's kind of it's a little offshoot, it's a little sideline thing that's interesting.
Well, I just think about the technology that's available now. We're all starting to wear wearables that are tracking our heart rate and, and can know if we fell down. And if you fell down, your phone asked you, do you need to call 911? Are you okay? I mean, these are amazing advancements, and I'd love your perspective on those.
Well, yeah, I'm sort of a contrarian on the sense that we use stuff like these remote monitoring apps all the time for that specific issue. The meat and potatoes of our stuff are you check your blood pressure, check your pulse, and check your weight every day. Mm-hmm. And then you answer 2 or 3 questions. Can you lay down or do you have to lay in a pillow? Are your feet swollen or not? And boom, you're done. I mean, it's simplistic to the absurd, but it's also extremely, extremely applicable. And it really covers it doesn't tell you why the feet are swollen. It doesn't tell you the why, but it tells you that, the house is on fire and we're trying to put the fire out before it gets too big. So in the sense, technology is useful, but it can't replace common sense and a one-to-one contact.
Just another tool that you can use with all of that.
Maybe a cooler tool, maybe a fancier tool. Maybe people like to do it because it's technologically advanced. As long as it's sort of like having a meal without a meat and potato. It's like nobody cares if you got green beans if you don't have anything to eat. And if you just take care of your basic stuff, that goes a long ways on health maintenance. It really does. So.
Absolutely. Doctor, just one last question for you. Do you have a proudest accomplishment? Something as you look back over the 40 years, you say, that was really something that I hold, that I treasure, that experience or that accomplishment?
Well, I have a series of individual patients that by themselves are remarkable, but I'm probably proudest of the fact I've been married 48 years. Because I wouldn't marry me. I'm too high maintenance. And I'm not a bad guy, but I'm just too high maintenance. And the fact that someone will put up with me is a high accolade. So that's my best achievement. In terms of individual patients, there's been patients along the way that I've taken care of. I just had one recently that passed away that was put in hospice. And when you're put in hospice, your routine medical care is suspended. And I continue to see the patient. He lived like 4 years. And he came off hospice. But I think individual achievements across the boards are referable back to the patient. It's this patient or that patient that had this or that, I think. But what I'm proudest of is being married that long.
Well, I love it. You talk about your marriage and your patients. It's all about relationships, isn't it?
Should be.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we still have to get the computer to work and all that routine stuff. But
Well, Doctor, it's been a real pleasure getting to know you. Thank you for all you've done, and especially for focusing on the doctor-patient relationship. I feel like you probably have had a lot of breakthroughs because you're willing to take the time and listen and be that cheerleader / coach along the way.
That's reasonable, and I think if you listen, you learn.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Doctor. Once again, I want to thank Dr. Robert Carney for joining us. I think it's pretty obvious why he has received this incredible honor and why he's been so effective as a doctor and a researcher. I love that he emphasized the patient-doctor relationship and how listening is a lost art. Once again, my name is Jay McFarland, and I hope you have enjoyed this edition of Patient Preferred Presents.